Hello, welcome to Miniature Realms. My name's Stuart. The latest FAQ and errata for Warhammer the Old World has landed a couple of days ago now, and everyone under the sun has made videos on it and given very good commentary, and I've enjoyed watching and reading about it already. But this video is going to do something slightly different. I want to look at it from a perspective of a casual or a narrative player and talk a little bit more about the impact it may have on the community and the wider game.
Miniature Realms is proudly sponsored by Counter-Attack Bases. They stock a wide range of counters, gaming aids and movement trays for multiple game systems and offer custom items to suit your club, your event or even your podcast or YouTube channel. Check out the link in the video description.
I really enjoyed listening to and watching and reading about all of the different reactions to the FAQs. I've been painting away, getting the final touches done for an event that I've got coming up at the weekend. And it's been really interesting to see how the community has been reacting to this, the kind of commentary. That's partly what I want to make this video about. I want to talk a little bit about the broader strokes of the FAQ and what that might mean for the game in the future as well. I think it's really important to view FAQs not just from a tournament perspective or a high-end competitive, what does this do to the meta perspective, but also to view it from what is probably a larger group of average players. And let me just explain a little bit more there about what I mean. You have your super laid back narrative gamers, and I play a lot of games like that, and in many ways it doesn't really matter what's in the FAQ or even in the main rulebook. As long as the basic framework is there, you will make changes for those kind of games as and when's needed. So if you're playing against Cave in a casual game, you may all say, don't take those bombs, don't take so many lanterns, or if you're doing that, I'm going to take some extra of this or that, and you balance it to make sure that you're having fun or telling the story that you want to tell for the game. And at the other end of the spectrum, you have your tournament players, your regular competitive players. And of course, they take an awful lot of notice of what's going in the FAQ because they want a balanced game. But I also feel that when the game isn't balanced, they tend to go away and fix it themselves, more as a larger community, more led by TOs who are creating comp packs and adjustments in their own FAQs in order to make those games a little bit more balanced for the competitive scene. And that's great. I really applaud that. I think that's really important. Then we have what I think are maybe the largest group of players, and I will call them the casual matched play player, and that's not very snappy. I'm not trying to coin anything there. And there's also the caveat that players can be in all of those different groups at different times, can play big narrative games and also go to events and have casual games in the middle as well. But what I really mean for that kind of player, it's your average player who plays a lot of their games at their club but doesn't go to any events or very few events. They're not really meta chasers as such. They may look at tournaments, they may watch creators talking about tournaments and the meta lists, and they may even copy those lists, and we'll come on to that a little bit as well. But they're there for casual play. They love their Warhammer, maybe read some lore, but they don't always need to play a full RPG narrative game either. They want to play a game that's pretty even between their friends on a club night or a club day or a Sunday, whatever it happens to be, and know that their army's got a better than half chance sometimes of winning a game. In many ways, you could argue that it's this group that are affected most by an FAQ and errata like this, because the narrative players will ignore stuff they don't like. The top end tournament players will find themselves in positions where stuff is changed to make things more balanced. But if you're playing someone that you don't know at your club or you don't know very well, maybe the game's arranged on a Facebook group or WhatsApp or something like that, you quite often just say, we're playing 2,000 points. You're not always going to be able to pick and choose your comp. You're just going to be trying to hope that they don't bring something really horrible, because your middle of the road army that you're bringing the models you like best might not always match up to it. Or vice versa, you might want a quite crunchy game, but your opponent's a bit laid back and you don't quite get as much out of it. It's a lot harder to have those conversations. So the more the game is balanced, the better it is for all players. So that's just really a bit of a preamble as to why I find it interesting to talk about the impact of a balance update, FAQ, errata like this, and the way the different parts of the community, because we're all different, might see it and might interact with it. The first thing that really stood out to me was this, funnily enough, balance update. I think that might be the first time that it's been called that for this. Now, you can tell me in the comments that I'm wrong, and they've all been called that, but in my mind, it's very much FAQ and errata for Warhammer the Old World and a lot of SDS games, and balance update is used for AOS and 40k for sure. The article actually does a pretty good job of explaining what to expect for it. It's a big nod to the 1.5 changes being big and not to expect that this time, or maybe not even more in the future in terms of large revisions, and that this really is a reaction to the publications since that point that need their own little updates and changes, along with a few other little bits, adjustments as well. So let's talk a little bit about balance update, the name and how regular it should be. Maybe the name has changed there, maybe it hasn't. If it has, maybe it's to tie it in more and make it more recognisable to players of other game systems. But again, it's not really that important. It's just a name. Probably what's more important is how regular we see these. And before playing Old World, before Old World came back, I was playing a lot of Middle-earth strategy battle game for a number of years, and you get 2 FAQs a year, and this seems to follow that. It's the same SDS side of the business, so it seems to make sense that it follows that as well. But I've noticed an increasing call from more and more people, especially since Cathay, that there be updates more often and much more of a quarterly balance, maybe that they shouldn't have left Cathay unbalanced for so long, that it was maybe damaging the game. I don't know how far I would take it with that. There's a little bit of hyperbole in that as well. I don't think the game was super damaged by Cathay. I think we all knew that it would be resolved. And maybe 3 months wouldn't be enough. I don't think at SDS they have quite a bigger team. They definitely don't have anyone there employed just yet, as far as I know, to look at FAQs and errata. So they physically have the time to review the data, collect the data, review the data. I'm not sure how it would happen. Whereas with 40k, obviously they're running a lot of the global events. They've got data at their fingertips, and it must be much easier to do those kind of things and make them quarterly. So I'm not sure it would work. You'd have to employ someone to do that. Your own opinions may vary, and that's fine as well. I can be persuaded differently now, I'm sure. But at the moment, I personally was happy to wait the 6 months for a fix. And if we have another problem with another book, again, I would suck it up knowing that they would fix it. What I think is really positive is these things are actually being dealt with. And anyone who remembers fantasy from before will know that the things just weren't fixed at all. You had FAQs that were mainly to do with typos or basic explanations of things, but they weren't changing rules because they weren't balanced. That was it. If something was broken, it just stayed broken pretty much until the next Army book came out, when it was probably nerfed into oblivion and so on. And you have this weird cycle. Very few races or factions became good for all the years. Probably just vampire counts, and they still are now. So in that regard, I'm really happy that we're in the best place ever in terms of support. Could it be better if you compare it with 40k and Age of Sigmar? Yes, maybe. Do we want that? I don't know. That's debatable depending on who you are. And can SDS deliver that? I'd argue not at the moment. They don't have the same resources and teams to do that. But anyway, let's turn to the documents themselves, and I'll give you my headlines. I'm not going to read through every line. I'm going to pick out my favourite bits, the bits I think really stand out, and discuss how they affect the game moving forward. There are 4 documents. One is for the main rulebook, one's for Forces of Fantasy, one's for Ravening Hordes, and there's a new one because the Cathay Army list isn't in either of those books, so it has its own. Of course, the headline question is, have they fixed Cathay? And the answer is yes, they have. They're probably not the top army anymore. That will be Vampire Counts or Tomb Kings, depending whether you're including legacies in there. And the main thing is, did they fix the balloon? And absolutely they did. The toughness has been reduced to 4, which is huge. The champion has now gone. It's now a normal crew member, which means you can't have any challenge shenanigans going on there. Unbreakable has been deleted, which means you can deal with these balloons a lot more, and including the disengage rule as well, which has been completely rewritten. Those are all really, really important. It means the balloons are less survivable now. Unless you're putting a character in there and adding a ward, those balloons are much easier to kill. You've not got a problem with them just backing away from combats all the time. You can take them on. Now, they're still pretty cheap, and maybe you could argue still they could have gone up in points a little bit as well. But those things have been addressed, and almost universally people are pretty happy with those. The other problem with the balloons was, of course, their damage output, and they've fixed that as well by making the bombing runs only once per game rather than each turn, and reducing the Dragonfire bomb's strength as well. And they're just huge. They really changes the balloon. They're still really good. They can still do stuff, but they're not going to be used in the same way. And whether we still see them to the same extent in armies now, I'm not so sure. Now, I've still seen some suggestion that they can be a little bit overpowered if you have your character in there. You have your magistrate as the character mount. You can obviously put a ward on there and make the balloon pretty survivable. Again, that was the way I ran it in my casual games, but I didn't do any bombing runs. And it's the first thing that occurred to me when I looked at the book was, I want my general in there. But again, I suppose it really depends on the context of the rest of your army. But you tell me. I don't think that that's broken to make it quite survivable. If it's your general, we've got dragons, we've got characters, lords on dragons with quite high saves and things going on. So I don't know if you compare it like that. But again, the context, what else are you taking in your army? If you've got 2 Shigengan lords in there, maybe the balloon with a magistrate in there as well is getting a little bit cheesy. My more narrative casual dream for my army in the future is going to be my magistrate running a load of peasants. So the general's in the balloon, but I'm not going to have Shigengan lords. I'll probably have Lashtramonts as maybe the new ones that are coming out look pretty cool, and then lots of peasants. So would a balloon then with a magistrate in it still be a little bit overpowered? I don't think so in that context, but again, I'm not a tournament player, so I miss things like that quite often. Let me know in the comments. I'm not going to read all the other Cathayan changes to you as well, but there's lots of little things there that really just take away some of the things that people are complaining about. Downgraded some of the magic items, made them more expensive as well, which is important. Made some of them not common as well, which is important. And also resolved the issues around the cannon and the ogre loader. He's just a normal crew member now as well, so he doesn't wander around the board afterwards. And the effects from the cannon also isn't stacking now. So all the kind of stuff that a lot of people were just doing themselves, playing themselves anyway, or restricted in their own army list building, but things that need addressing definitely for that more match tournament play, and I think they've done a really good job of it there. Let me know what you think in the comments. That's more than enough about Cathay anyway, and I'm going to be much briefer about the rest of it and talk about it in much broader strokes. The main rulebook was light, as they said in the article, that this isn't a 1.5. There's a few subtle changes. Some of the headlines include not being able to tow in on woods anymore for your cover, that baggage trains are now impassable, which may throw up some janky things. Again, go and watch some of the other reviews about it. There's some fun theories about things you could do about blocking your artillery behind it. Again, I don't think it's going to be a huge thing, something that TOs will sort out if they need to. There's some questions answered around press of battle, which clears up that you really can't just hide all your characters in your second rank now, which again will affect some people's tactics for their particular army. But for most people, I think that's a real quality of life change for the game as well. Even the match play guide saw a couple of clarifications, one about army composition and repeating of units, and depending on what camp you fall in there, you'll either agree with that or not. Again, I don't see it as a huge problem, because people will come up with their own comps if those ones don't quite fit. And another one about, can you score 2 objectives at once, which you can't, which you'd imagine that most people weren't playing it that way. But overall, I think the main rulebook and match play guide changes there show that they are keeping an eye on the community and listening and seeing what's going on and trying to address some of the things. There's lots of questions, as always, that you think, why are people asking that? And there's things that seem to have been fixed that maybe they didn't need to be. But as a whole, it's pretty good. It's positive. There'll always be things that people don't like, but most of the changes seem logical and seem to be positive. The Forces books had their own little adjustments, of course, as well. And again, it's a similar vein. A few more head scratches in here, I think. Range is now restricted to a max of 20, which as a dwarf player with an army that I don't think's hugely powerful, you scratch your head a little bit, but maybe there are certain instances when that can be abused a little bit as well. What I do like to see there is the ability to put a max on a unit limit, and I'd like to see more of that, maybe in second edition, to stop some units getting a little bit too big in the game. There's a lot of minimums. I'd like to see more maximums as a way of guiding players to make sure that they're not taking the mick too much. Empire gets some nice little buffs, much in the way they did before with generals, but this time round it's the priests that get an increase to their leadership, which is going to make them much more usable. Maybe you can lead an army with them now as well, and other stuff as well. Flagellants have now got a higher toughness. Wood elves get a little bit of love. They get some points decreases for quite a lot of units, a lot of their core units. We know that wood elves are probably struggling a little bit in the meta if you follow that side of the game. So the positive is they've had some points reductions. The negative is it's probably not enough to really make a difference. So it's a bit of a mixed bag there. I think it shows that they're keeping an eye on the community, as I've already said, watching win rates and things like that. And they're trying to make positive adjustments, but without going too strong. They maybe got a little bit light on there, but I think points adjustments across so many armies may be needed, and that might be something for a new edition to start a little bit ground up on them. Now I'm having to stop myself from getting down into the weeds too much and commenting on all the magenta. You go and read it yourself, go and look at some of those other really, really great reviews that are out there. One thing that really did stand out for me, actually, was that Renegade Crowns didn't have any clarification on who their parent faction was. And does that mean they are a faction by themselves in Realms of Man, which is what it says at the top of their Army of Infamy? Most armies of Infamies don't have an allies section at the bottom of the army list because you know who they can ally with, their parent faction. So for your Dwarf Slayers, you can ally with Dwarves, Grand Army. That's all you can do. But Renegade Crowns, we don't know who their parent faction is, and it doesn't really occur most of the time until I decided to take them to a doubles event, and I emailed the events team and asked them whether I could take them and who could they ally with. This was a few weeks ago now. I think it was even before Christmas, and they replied very, very quickly, and what I think is maybe identical wording to what appears on the last page of this errata or FAQ in this case, and it's an Arcane Journal of War such as Fury, and it says in a doubles event as described in the match play guide, which armies can Renegade Crown army ally with, and it obviously lists Bretonia, Renegade Crowns, and Empire of Man, which is great. That's great. That makes sense. The answer I got seemed logical at the time. I'm sure that's what everyone would have guessed. What I expected to see in the FAQ, or what I expected to see in the errata, was if it was his own army and it's not parented to Empire or to Bretonia, that it'd have a line in there to say that it can do this. Which is odd because this would suggest you can only ally it in a doubles event. It feels like it needs something like that in the main errata to just cover all types of play. If you want to take some Renegade Crowns allies with your Empire, technically you can't unless you're playing in a doubles event. Bit weird. Maybe I'm missing something. I'm going to be even more brief for the Ravening Hordes. I think that one of the main standouts will be the increase of casting to Vile Tide, up from 8 till 9. Again, if you're playing competitive circles, then that will probably mean something more to you. If not, it's a very good spell, and it's a little bit harder to get off now, and I think even Beastman players are nodding and saying, yeah, fair enough. Other than that, there are lots of nice little snippets. Again, I'm not going to cover them all there now. Nothing too groundbreaking, I don't think. Little subtle changes and explanations here and there. Now, I'm sure many of you will disagree with me and be upset about certain things that have or have not been done, but I don't think they've really broken anything with this errata. There's the odd little head scratcher that they might need to change again in the future. They might need to clarify the wording around baggage if it does start to become something that can be cheesed a little bit. But other than that, I think most of the stuff is pretty logical and sort of follows up with what I've said, that this has been a nice overall minor adjustment dealing with a couple of the bigger problems, mainly Cathay, that are in the community at the moment. And that probably leaves us with two big powerful armies being both undead armies at the moment. One is obviously a legacy with Vampire Counts and Tomb Kings being the other, and Cathay has now probably jumped out at that top three. Does that worry me? Not an awful lot. This has always been the way the game of Warhammer Fantasy has been. There's always been top armies, there's always been bottom armies, and that sometimes changes from edition to edition. Sometimes some armies seem to be good for many editions, and sometimes some armies seem to struggle for multiple editions as well. They never ever quite get the balance right. And I'm not sure you can with this game, and I've said this in videos before. I think they need to scrap and rewrite the game completely at an attempt to really try and make it balanced, especially when they quite clearly started with a blueprint of 6th, 7th, 8th really to kind of build from, and so many of the units work in almost identical ways. And every time we have a new faction and new rules, and we have new FAQ and errata, those legacy armies, which are not being changed anymore now, and they've said they're not going to, those are probably moving further and further away from where the overall game and the meta is, aside from vampire counts, who are doing very well. But it's very hard to address issues with an army when you can't address the legacy army list. So it's only via things that maybe would cover both Tomb Kings and Vampire Counts that you can maybe address some of those issues as well. Or you're playing with main game rules as well, core rules that might affect them. So it's a little bit harder to go and adjust that. And maybe they're not even caring or trying to. And that will definitely upset some people. The legacy faction thing is always emotive. I love those armies. They are Warhammer to me. I want them in the game, and the longer it goes on without them, I'm the same as many of you. I increasingly become concerned that we won't see them, and that second edition, they might just disappear. We've seen it before. There are things going on at Games Workshop that mean that's happening. It's definitely not a creative choice. For sure, it's an accounting choice and a way of separating IPs because of the sort of the blurred lines between certain factions appearing in two games. To a consumer and a player of the games and a lover of the games, it feels like utter madness. I'm sure it makes more sense to them. Internally, I hope they see the other side and realise that customers really want those things. There's money there to be spent, and that also that if they do completely get rid of them, the dissatisfaction will lose some people as well, and that would be horrible for the community to fracture. The other thing is that it gives away control to the community as well to deal with those things, because we will continue to play those factions. There's already an alternative set of army lists, the Renegades, that some people use, some people don't, but it's there, and that will only grow if Games Workshop aren't able to do something about those. So I really hope that they are coming back at some point, or at least in some format, and that maybe they'll look at it and go, you know what, shall we give them a bit of an FAQ and errata and change those lists again as well. They're not the primary function, and I know it's a lot of work for a very small team to do that, but I really hope that they see it as a way of still servicing that wider community that maybe still spend some money with Games Workshop with newer factions but want to play other factions as well. I've got a Skaven army I'm going to be building this year, and I'm going to have lots of fun with it playing regardless, but it'd be lovely if it was updated, if they could find the time to do it with the small writing team that they've got for this game. I know many of you might not be as generous as I am there with my understanding of the issues around those armies and what they shouldn't and shouldn't do, and that's fine as well. I just always try to be as understanding and as pragmatic as I can about these things. Wanting those things to come back and shouting about them doesn't bring them back. I just really hope that they get the opportunity to do it. I'm pretty confident there are people writing and working on the game that would love to do that if they are able to. So hopefully that whatever's stopping it will change in the future. So fingers crossed. So it's probably time to sum up, and I'll try not to be too repetitive, but that's kind of what conclusions are. I think the community's in a pretty good place and will be in a much better place now that Cathay has had those restrictions, and we won't really know until they've been played in their current form the full impact of it. But it feels like, and the commentary on it as well from players that play an awful lot more than me, that know an awful lot more about the sort of the competitive and the balance side than me, seems to be that this is a really good job and that they're still good, and that people will hopefully still want to play them. In fact, many more people might play them because they won't feel like they don't want to be that guy and all of that stuff. So I think that's really good. I think that's really positive. The demonstration again that they are keeping an eye on the community, they are listening, and they are making changes to the things that we talk about and we complain about. There are some wacky things in there as well, and there always will be. Maybe they don't do it as quick as some people would like, but I think there are reasons for that as well. And hopefully, as the game continues to grow and the community continues to grow, that more people can be hired to work and develop the game which means we might get these changes even more often. So I think those are all really, really positive signs, and I think the game is in an even more positive place than it was before, now that the Cathay elephant in the room has been fixed. And all the ire will now turn to poor old VC players and maybe some Tomb King players as well, and one of those is a legacy army, so Games Workshop can pretty much pretend that that's not a problem. But let me know what you think in the comments. I'm sure you've watched lots of other videos and have your own opinions on the FAQ. So let me know what you think are your favourite changes, things you didn't like, and the stuff I've been talking about today, that wider impact on the game. Do you think that puts the game in a better place than it was? Do you think it's on a good path? And what are your hopes and maybe fears for the game and its balance in the future? So if you've enjoyed this video, listening to me ramble along, please do give it a like. You're going to drop me a comment already. If you've watched this far, you've got to comment and give me your own opinion on the video. And subscribe to the channel if you haven't already done so. I'm off now to finish painting the last few bits ready for my doubles event at the weekend, and if you subscribe to the channel you'll hear all about that next week, no doubt, and maybe even a painting tutorial or video to do with the unit that I'm painting at the moment. So there's a real mix on the channel if you're new to it, between hobby and me talking like this. If you'd like to support me and the channel even further than liking and subscribing and all that stuff, please check out my Patreon. It's the very best way of supporting me, and thank you to all my existing patrons for all the support you give me. I really couldn't do this without you. Please check out my channel sponsor as well, Counter-Attack Bases. Loads and loads of old world gaming aids and even custom dice as well. But thank you very much for watching. Take care, and I'll catch you soon.